Welcome to How's Your Represence? I am Mark Galvin, your host for this wonderful show, and we are produced by ePresence. We're so glad you are with us today. This is such a great time of the year. The trees are turning green. Actually, the trees are already green here in Atlanta and probably the part of the world that you're in, depending on the hemisphere you're in. You're probably seeing the trees turn a little more green where you are. Absolutely wonderful part. The pollen here in the Southeast got a little ugly this year, but it's on the way out, so it's really, really beautiful. We are always thrilled that you're with us today, and we're going to talk about some great things that are really timely. We're going to talk about cybersecurity today, so stick around so you can see our guest because he is absolutely terrific. We love that you're here today. What do we do on this show? We are a show that likes to talk about how to do things a little better in either social media, in digital, or in cybersecurity even. So feel free to join us in on the conversation. If you have a question, you can just drop it right into the chat box wherever you are. Feel free to drop those those questions right there in that chat box, and we will serve them up, if you will, right to our guest. Also, wherever you are, we'd love for you to subscribe. So look for that subscribe button there on the screen. You want to subscribe to either Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, or Twitter because they'll let you know when we go live. And when we do go live, it gives you a chance to, you can throw a question at our guest and become a part of the show. So love for you to look for that. Look at right on the screen, and you should be able to track those things down. So what are we going to talk about today? Specifically, I already teased you on cybersecurity. We're going to talk about the right way to do cybersecurity and get into things like the biggest cybersecurity issues for businesses. Maybe we'll get into cybersecurity insurance. And what about the Ukrainian war? Is there anything there that we should be worrying about here in the U.S.? And when you watch the news, it seems like we are could be at least, a target for those cybersecurity concerns. So just a reminder, wherever you are, we would love for you to ask us questions as they come up, or just drop a little note wherever you are in the chat box. Let us know. Are you joining us from El Paso? Are you joining us from San Francisco? Just let us know what part of the country you're tuning in from, and that'll give us a good sense of how great our audience is. Well, let me tell you about our guest today. Our guest today is Keyaan Williams. He is the CEO, leader, and extraordinaire with Class LLC. He is a cyber leader and actually Class LLC stands for Cyber Leadership and Strategy Solutions LLC. As he told me before the show, he came out of government. And so everything in government is an acronym. And of course, he created his own acronym. He has managed large security programs, primarily here in the Southeast with the CDC. He's also the chair of the Cyber Strategy Retreat Advisory Board. I've done some work and I have rubbed elbows with Keyaan from time to time. And I just want you to know, he really is someone that knows what he's talking about. Stick around. I know you're going to see something new. And this is something that we're always thinking about on small businesses or businesses in general. Cybersecurity is so important. So I think you'll find this very interesting. Great. I think I have waxed on eloquently long enough. Let's see if we can find Keyaan over there. He's back in the green room, probably sipping some tea. Let's see. There he is. Keyaan, welcome. How are you, sir? You bet. I am so glad that you could join us today. I hit the wrong button. That's the button I want. I am so glad that you were able to join us today. You and I have talked a lot of times. In fact, you have a show or an event or a convention where you gather a bunch of people together. You've done this online. You do it on purpose. Share a little bit about that. I think that that's really interesting.
Sure. I've been in the industry for about 20 years. And in the beginning of my career, I used to be the guy that had a security background. I'd go to the security conference, and the preaching to the choir was really the name of the game. And so I stepped back and thought about it and said, it would be really interesting for all of these security people who are saying that our counterparts in IT don't know what they're talking about, who are saying that the business just doesn't understand. There are all these disparaging remarks about other people in an organization, that I create an event that brings everybody together so that IT and business people and even board members can stand up for themselves and say, no, actually, you think that you have all the answers, but you're missing a couple of things. The outcome of that for businesses is that there's a lot more collaboration and everybody understands better what the other parts of the business are doing. For individuals, you have much more insight about what really works and what doesn't work. And very often there are things that people have overlooked that they're exposed to by having those conversations. So we've done 7 conferences. We do
7.
online
I didn't
events.
realize you'd done 7.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I started in Cupertino in 2019, and like a crazy person, I did a brand new conference that nobody had ever heard of in Silicon Valley, in Atlanta, and in Boston. So it was very expensive getting it off the ground. But since then, I've had about 5,000 people who have participated in what is really a small event. I've never had more than 200 people at a single event. But over the
Wow.
course of the last couple of years, doing online conferences, hybrid events, monthly webinars, executive roundtables where we sit down and have dinner, and even the summit and a 4-day executive retreat that I do at the Broadmoor in Colorado. There are numerous opportunities to bring diverse backgrounds together and have everybody talk about the solution to the cybersecurity problem.
That is so cool. Well, you do so many great things in addition to this conference. How did you get into cybersecurity? How did, that's just not something you happenstance upon. How did you end up in this
You
space?
say you don't happenstance upon it, but I'm in cybersecurity because of a car accident.
No way. I don't think I've heard this
I,
story. Tell me
so
more.
once upon a time, I used to unload tractor trailers for a living. And so I would get up at 3 in the morning, get dressed. I'd be at the facility by 5 o'clock. I'm unloading trailers all morning. We clock out at about noon. And when I was doing this, I was also enrolling to go to college. And so my boss let me use his truck to drive up to the dorms. I was so sleepy that I ran through a red light and ripped the front bumper off this lady's car. Now, mind you, this was back in the day. There were no cell
Whoops.
phones. I wasn't wealthy enough to walk around with the phone in a briefcase. The best that I had was a pager, and there was no damage to my boss's car. So I said, ma'am, if you follow me to my dorms, you'll see where I live. We can write down all the information, whatever it takes to make you whole. I will spend the money that I've saved up all summer to honor my commitment to your car being restored. And so everything worked out well. Because of my commitment to integrity, she got me a job at the Georgia World Congress Center. Back then, they called it a cable monkey. So I literally crawled through the rafters at the Georgia World Congress Center Authority, pulling out old network cables and installing new cables. But I was whistling while I was working. I was having a good time. And the outcome of that is that I ended up working on the help desk. From the help desk, I end up working in, system administration and bigger IT things. And after I came back from being in the Army, because I was temporary, but I enlisted in the Army, served as a chemical weapons specialist. When I came back, because of the IT experience, I was able to get on the help desk at the CDC. And on the help desk, I discovered that there are a lot more IT people than there are security people, transitioned into cybersecurity, and the rest has been history. But I
Oh my
literally can
goodness.
pinpoint I'm doing what I'm doing today because of the grace of God and because somebody allowed me to honor my commitment to give her cash to fix her car, because there was no exchange of insurance information. I couldn't even find the insurance card.
Oh my goodness. There's one thing that you said. Now I spent a few days at the Georgia World Congress Center. I work at the Omni Hotel for many years, so I don't need to say more to you. You get that. And you're you're not a little guy. I mean, this is not a. I mean, that's not a slight. I mean, you are a. Well, let's put it this way. If I was walking around with you and some guy wanted to take me on, I would probably push you first. Because you're certainly a little you look a lot stronger than me. That's really what it all comes down to. And to hear you running around the rafters, that's pretty phenomenal. I'm amazed at
Yeah, just remember, it's not my size, it's my skill. The Army trained me well,
that.
and I used to kickbox to stay in shape. I'm also about
Oh my.
70 pounds heavier now than I was when I was a more fit person.
Oh, okay. Crawling through the rafters. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes.
You were a little. You're a few pounds lighter. Well, that is really cool. I did not know that you had spent some time at the Georgia World Congress Center. That is really cool. Well, I'm ready to dig into some good stuff. You ready to get into cybersecurity?
It is my favorite topic. I'm looking forward to sharing.
This is your sweet spot. Well, I love to hear that. So you have said to me before, most people are doing cybersecurity wrong. What is the right way to do cybersecurity?
So, Mark, I'm going to tell you that I am so convicted about that statement that most people are doing cybersecurity wrong, that is the working title for a book that I'm going to write. And so,
Oh, really?
yes, yes. So I'm working with a great writing coach to pull all the thoughts together, but I think it'll be a good work and it'll be business oriented, so the audience can look forward to seeing something that's fun to read. But if we talk about the wrong way to do cybersecurity, I think what people are doing wrong is throwing technology at the problem. Academically, when people talk about
Yeah.
cybersecurity, they say it's a combination of people, process, and technology. But then when you look in the marketplace, cybersecurity is a $1 trillion industry, but it's $1 trillion worth of technology that, for the most part, people don't implement correctly. Or if it's implemented correctly, they don't maintain it, they don't update it. And then there are no people because you spent all your money on technology. And so I would argue that the right way to do things is to have a good balance of critical technology, qualified people, and then formal documented processes. And for the audience, I'll give a good example. According to the FBI's crime reports, $2.4 billion was the amount of losses from a cybersecurity attack called business email compromise. Now, that data is from
Unbelievable.
2021, but that is a lot of money. And most of the companies that were subject to those attacks satisfied their regulatory requirements. They had basic security controls in place. But what business email compromise does is it leverages weaknesses in people and processes. And so when I say that people are doing it wrong, I can say that with conviction because if I were incorrect, people wouldn't lose $2.4 billion a year because the bad guys are overcoming people and process, even given that trillions of dollars are spent on technology.
That is just incredible to me. Trying to wrap my head around what $2.4 billion of losses looks like. It, there is this hidden threat, and that's what cybersecurity is. It's like a hidden threat, right? If someone is going to potentially rob my house, there's a physical aspect to that. I have a chance I could see them coming. I could lock my door. It's very physical. Cybersecurity is one of those things. It's not something you can see, but yet this unknown, unseeable thing can come in and attack my system and cost me money. What is like you look at a company? Well, actually, this is interesting. There's a guy that he's in. This gentleman, Steven Eisenstein, runs he installs tents here in Atlanta. So he's a tent rental company. So if you were to look at Steven, and Steven, thank you for your comment. If you were to look at Steven and his company, what is the threat what's his exposure in cybersecurity where he should be aware of?
Well, most companies have data, and the priority for cybersecurity, when you really get down to the brass tacks, is the processes that you use to have an inventory of all of your data so that you know what you have, where it exists, and how important it is, to make sure that you have the data organized in containers based on how critical it
Huh.
is. Like under ideal circumstances, you don't want your critical data to be in the same bucket with things that you don't care about so that you can focus on the most important items. And then it's thinking about the people, process, and technology that are going to protect that data. And so even for Steven, What I assume without having talked to him and not knowing anything about him before this conversation, I would assume that he has a customer list. He probably uses other service providers to support his business. There could be things that if you were accounting for it in QuickBooks, it would be billed to operations, but those
Yep.
providers that you're using may have access to your systems, or they may send you emails that you trust that are coming from somebody that you know and that you've done business with. But if somebody compromises your service provider and they send you an email and says, "Hey, Steven, click this link so that you can get the recent invoice for the service that I provided," and it really wasn't Steven's service provider, but it's somebody who compromised his service provider, figured out who the service provider works with, and then sent malicious messages to all of those people, Steven could be compromised simply by clicking on an email from somebody that he thought he knew. Then
Yep.
you click on
Yep.
that email, the attacker gets access to banking information, to customer information,
Oh my.
and the more information the attacker has access to, the more expensive it is to provide remediation and solve the problem. Also, the more it damages your reputation. It wouldn't be a big deal if, say, for instance, that I was Steven's customer, I received a message from him that attackers sent on his behalf, and I was compromised as one individual. You can deal with losing one customer, but imagine that Steven
Right.
has a customer database of 10,000 people. People who have been to events, that have subscribed to the marketing messages. There is a lot of harm that comes to a business where 10,000 people receive a malicious email from the attacker versus just one person. And so even for a business that isn't running an e-commerce solution, they don't have an online store, they're setting up tents for great events. I assume that there's probably a large ecosystem of people involved in that business, and all of the data that's involved in the operations of that business is what I would focus on protecting from a cybersecurity perspective.
There is a something interesting that I went through just recently. I had a business address change, and I found that even though I changed my address on the invoice that I was sending all the clients, all business people are like shaking their head, like, yeah, of course. You change your address on the invoice, the client doesn't see it. They've got it built in their system and they're just firing off and they're just mailing checks to the address that's built into their system. So I created a list of all the clients that send me checks, and I was sending them an email, and the first person I sent the email to sent me a note back and said, "You need to confirm you're you." And I thought that was brilliant,
Excellent.
right? Because they have evidently been through that sort of, someone could have hacked another vendor, and the vendor says, "Oh, your checks need to come to that address now." And so I thought that was great, which made me shift gears, and I started sending proof that I was the right person and that I'd be happy to get on a phone call, and made it easier for them to connect with us. Um, that brings up a question that, and we have and actually I do have another question, but before I ask the next question on my list, what about people who use QuickBooks Online? So I'm thinking, I have so much data that's sitting there in that cloud. As a cybersecurity threat, if somebody were to get into that, I'm in trouble. What should I do as a business owner to protect that asset?
So I would say that all of the cloud assets that you're using, the number one thing that you can do is turn on multi-factor authentication. Uh, I,
Good.
I
Okay.
have a great example for you, as a matter of fact. So in
Good.
the news, it's been within the last 30 days. There was a big news story in cybersecurity news. Regular people may not have heard about it, but HubSpot had a cyber incident. Customer data was exposed because an employee within HubSpot was capturing data about people that were involved in cryptocurrency. And so it was an attack. It was not an attack from the outside. It was not a direct attack against the companies that were using HubSpot. It was an employee inside of HubSpot who had access to the
Wow.
environment, who abused his access to look at who are all the people that are customers of these cryptocurrency companies. And cryptocurrency was a specific industry that was targeted. And you think about all the information you have in your CRM, that individual was able to send phishing messages and other fake messages to people, knowing what they were interested in, what they subscribed to, the companies that they worked with, which increases the likelihood that people were clicking on links and bad things that were happening. And so
Wow.
then it begs the question, do I stop using HubSpot or Salesforce or the other CRM solutions that I use to run my business? And realistically,
Well, and you talked about branding, right? This is, I hear this, and this is going to hurt their brand because HubSpot is a CRM company, and makes me wonder, gosh, if I'm a HubSpot client, does that person have access to my data? And I know it's a whole nother rabbit hole, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. So anyway, keep going. I just think that's fascinating.
this is what happens for companies from the cybersecurity perspective, though.
Right.
Multi-factor authentication ensures that only authorized people have access to your data, even if you're using HubSpot. And so when you look at the recommendations, if the companies that were affected had used all the security features that HubSpot makes available, the issue would not have been an issue. It would have been prevented. There's an option in HubSpot
Interesting.
to say that only employees have access to the data in the repository. And if HubSpot is performing help desk or customer service, you have to push a button for the HubSpot employee to have access to your data. What tends to happen is
Huh.
most people just leave the data open, and then you are exposing yourself to people with bad intentions who might be employees of the companies that you're using. And then it takes us back to QuickBooks. I'm a security person. I run a professional services company. It's easier for me to use QuickBooks than to do it the old school way with a ledger.
Do you use QuickBooks too?
Yeah, I use
You use that?
QuickBooks
Okay.
Online. I mean, I have a CPA firm that I work with. Accountants from the CPA firm have access to my QuickBooks, but I, as the owner of the account, control the amount of access that they have. So I'm the only person that
Right.
has full access. My wife is a backup in case I'm incapacitated, so that she can get into the business banking accounts. My
In case you get stuck crawling through the ducks at the Georgia World Congress Center. I
Yes,
hear you.
or on some other adventure. But it's always good to have a backup that can log into your critical accounts. But then for
Sure.
everybody else, it makes much more sense to limit their access to only what is absolutely necessary. The issue with HubSpot,
I
too much access for people that didn't need it. The same thing happens with QuickBooks. The same thing happens with Google Cloud, with Amazon Cloud, and with Microsoft Cloud. A lot of your public data breaches exist because people didn't configure their cloud solutions properly, not because the cloud is inherently insecure. There's a difference between
Yeah.
using the tools that are available and not turning on things that are going to reduce the risk that you have.
Yeah, that's a great point. We had a client today, as a matter of fact. They had changed their password on their social media. And by the way, we're in the social media business, Keon.
I've
Did
heard
you know
something
that?
about that.
I don't know if I told you. So anyway, we had a client who changed their password on their social media. Totally cool. Happens all the time. And we couldn't get in, and we just sent a note. Hey, do us a favor. We have a secure portal to plug in passwords. And he went out and changed his password, and he sent us an email. He said, "Hey, here's my new password." And I replied back, "Can you please use the portal?" And he did, in fact, go back and change his password again and use the portal. And here is my concern: is he copied the entire company on those passwords? And all the people that got it are great people, not a question at all. I'm not worried about those folks at all. But what if one of them forwarded an email to someone else and it happened and that password was, buried in the trail? So it is amazing. We have to be diligent about where those passwords go and how they're shared. All right, I'm looking at the time. We got 6 minutes left in this segment. I do have one more question. You want to recap something real quick
Nope,
before I ask the
nope.
next
We'll
question?
we'll keep moving forward.
All right. I had a feeling this was going to happen. We have so much to talk about. The next one I want to throw at you is, what is the number one cybersecurity concern? Did you talk about that that didn't come up in the first thing. What's that big thing? And you're probably going to say what was it? What'd you bring up? Multi-factor authentication, something like that. But
Well, if we're going to label it a concern, the number one concern is misconfigured technology.
okay.
85% of targeted attacks are using compromised credentials. And so most of the bad guys are just harvesting every credential they can get from every data breach. And then there's a technical term called credential stuffing, where they just point every username and password they could find at whatever they're trying to log into. And nine times out of 10, because people reuse passwords and because a lot of people aren't using multi-factor authentication, bad guys get in using credential stuffing as a solution. And so
Huh.
having security solutions and configuring them properly, as I said before, are two different things. So it's somewhat of a recap, but I can't stress enough how important it is to make sure that you have an inventory of all your solutions, to make sure that they're configured properly, to make sure that they're up to date. Mark, I'm sure that you've seen things about SSL versus TLS when you start getting into network security. The
Right.
internet almost shut down when they turned off SSL as the old version of internet encryption and then transitioned over to TLS because people did not heed any of the warnings that the old version was going away because it was insecure. And so staying on top of what do I have? Have I patched my computer? Have I patched my software? Is everything up to date? The more you keep your systems and your solutions configured correctly, patched properly, and up to date, the more you're reducing your risk. So much so that the Australian Signals Directorate, which is the group that does cybersecurity for Australia at a national level, did a research paper
Hmm.
in conjunction with Canada and the United States. And they found that 85% of your risk is reduced by removing administrative privileges where they don't need to exist, by only allowing authorized software to run in the environment, and by applying patches and updates to your computer solutions in a timely manner. And so now we've reduced everything down to 15%, which becomes manageable for every business owner, even if you don't have a
Right.
full service security provider, and even if you don't have full time employees that are doing this kind of work on your behalf.
This is very interesting. So, you mentioned something I'd love to ask about, and that is not giving employees access to, full their higher level of authorities than they really need. And is there a system that is good to apply to that when you say, okay, it's fine, you want to be nice and you want to give these people access because it makes them feel good about themselves, blah, blah, blah. But there's probably a good methodology to apply to that. Is that something that is kind of in the can that you say, okay, here's the rule, or how do you apply that?
It varies widely. If you're in a Microsoft environment, the concept is called group policies. So you can set up group policies so that every computer connected to the corporate networking system allows and disallows certain behaviors. If you're running a smaller
Yeah. Okay.
business, it requires a little more attention. But even for me, I run a small business that does big things globally, but I have about a dozen employees. Even on my own computer where I know what I'm doing, unless I need to, I'm not operating as the administrator of the computer. I'm operating as a limited user so that even if I click on something on accident in my email because I didn't know what it was, very little is going to happen. And so all the things that we're
Interesting.
talking about are easy to implement, but they're practices more than it is throwing technology at the problem.
Oh, that's really interesting. Well, there's something you told me a while ago that I implemented immediately, and it was that in Microsoft, you can go in and put a little banner on the top of every single email that comes in from an external source that says this is an external email. And I did that at your suggestion after you told me that. It took me a little bit to find it. You said, "Oh, it's really easy." I did have to dig. I did dig through the help screen, but I that certainly was I think just very brilliant. And it's not the whole, right? Most of the people that access our systems are going to know what to do and what not to do. But it is just that one time when it is very well could be me. If something pops up, I go, oh, I should respond. Oh, wait a minute, that's external. It looks like that's coming from Lisa Cutter, our VP of marketing. And no, it's not. It actually came from outside of our system. So I thought that was brilliant. And we implemented that as soon as you suggested.
Yeah, for the audience, the technical term is just a warning banner, but it doesn't really matter the email system you use. It's not specific to vendors. It's another one of those concepts that's a practice or a procedure. You're already using the technology. Maximizing your safe use of the technology is simply a manner of telling all of your employees, hey, this didn't come from inside. And so if you get a message from the CEO that says, hey, wire this money to this location, if it has that warning banner, it's an additional reminder that this probably didn't come from the CEO, it came from outside. People have a
Warning.
flag that waves bright. My color for my warning banner is fuchsia, so it stands out immediately. But you see the fuchsia banner. Hey, Mark Galvin really didn't send this to the CFO to wire $50,000 to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. We avoid a lot just by having
Yep.
a good practice and procedure in place for the company.
Oh, I think that's great. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break coming up here. But before we do, where is the best place for people to go to find you?
So you can send me an email. I answer all of my emails eventually. And so email is the best way to catch up with me directly. If you're interested, when you send the email, say you'd love to connect on LinkedIn, and I'll reach out to you. I have some security settings in place to cut down on spam. People can also go to my website, just www.class-llc.com, and see some of the fun things that we're doing. Plenty of complimentary information in the blog posts, lots of opportunities to do educational sessions where we're just educating the world and not charging them for it. Because the more secure the world is, the less I have to worry about for me, for my wife, and for my children.
Oh, I love that. Very nice. Well, folks, we're having a long conversation with Keyaan Williams from Class LLC. He is a cybersecurity expert. We're going to take a break. Our shows are now hour long, and so we like to take a break in the middle of the show. And so we will be right back. So stay right where you are, and we will bring Keyaan back and ask him some more cybersecurity questions.